Okay, so our next speaker is Dr. Andrew Edwards. So he did his PhD here at CDU and now works partly for CDU but really within the Darwin Centre for Bushfire Research. And so he's obviously doing quite a lot of work on bushfires and remote...
Hi. Yeah, I'm a former student, PhD student here from Charles Darwin University. Stefan was one of my supervisors. He features a bit in this presentation as well. Our group have moved only a couple of years ago to the university from Bushfires NT, which is the Rural Fire Authority in the Northern Territory. We've had a lot to do with the other fire agencies and anybody to do with fire management in North Australia for quite many years, and it was just becoming a little bit unreasonable for a government like the Northern Territory government to expect research and the work that we were doing to be expanded into other states. You know, states are a bit funny like that about boundaries. This is the core of our group. Adjunct Professor Jeremy Russell-Smith in the middle there. He sits up at the top of the tower up there. Dominique wasn't there for the photo there, and I had to put that one here. It's her own fault for not turning up. Jay's here, up the back. Cameron's not here. Anyway, so that's the group, and there are other people that we work with quite closely. We've worked with a lot of young Indigenous rangers throughout Arnhem Land, predominantly, but in Kakadu and elsewhere. Felicity, you might see her on campus sometimes. She's employed by the NRM board to set up a whole lot of reports, and I can show you a bit of that stuff later. The colleagues down there from CSIRO we work with. There's Sophia when she was doing her PhD, you're here. So she's one of the many. And Stefan, of course, quite important, and I'll show you later in terms of data he supplies. And other people from the government that work with Grant and Mandy, Nick and Doc up the top there. So we've had a very strong collaborative relationship with lots of different scientific agencies, and our skill mostly has been spatial. We're all GIS remote sensing people. We're also ecologists and do a lot of vegetation mapping as well. So a lot of skills, but mostly around the spatial, and we've found that's been very useful. So the primary reason for a lot of the work that we do is something that came out many years ago. This was the State of Environment, one of the first biggest national reports on what was happening to the Australian environment, came out in 1996. All this research was done in the 90s. This map was a composite of the knowledge of leading fire scientists and ecologists and agencies throughout the country. And you can see that North Australia, nobody really knew what was going on up there, and that was probably the issue. It was more about ignorance than people being wrong. This is 2004. This is a fairly normal year for burning. So you can see the green mapping is earlier dry season burns in a time that we'd sort of say was more about prescribed burning. In this period there was very little prescribed burning going on outside of sort of the major Darwin region in North Australia. And that's since changed in the last and become a bit more the other way in a lot of areas. And just to compare, if we go back to that map, so this is what they thought was the occurrence of large bushfires. So where were we having all the large bushfires? And then through the remote sensing data, we were able to illustrate and demonstrate that quite clearly. I didn't show the bottom of Australia because there's bugger all down there. All the big fires are happening up here. So this is the frequency of late dry season fires only. So just your big hot fires. You can see Arnhem Land, eastern Arnhem Land, southern parts of the top end, all across the Mitchell Plateau and across the Dampier Peninsula in Western Australia, and Cape York gets a hammering as well. A lot of that area is grassland, so it's a bit deceiving, but still lots and lots of very big late dry season fires occurring right across North Australia, and it's something we've had to do something about. Just some examples of imagery, and just to give you some idea of what we're dealing with. So this is a management set of mapping that we do using this Landsat satellite. I don't know how familiar you are with satellites, but Landsat's got a 30-metre pixel. You can see the detail in the mapping there. That's Litchfield, just south of Darwin. And the only issue with the Landsat is you don't have a lot of frequency of occurrence of the imagery. You know, you've got 16 days between acquisitions. So at this time in 1997, we were paying about $1,500 an image. So it was very expensive. So we only bought 2 or 3 a year, as you can see, and this also fits in over Darwin, this particular Landsat scene, and so we were able to use it for lots of purposes, but you can still, we're spending $4,500 over 10 years ago. So It's a lot of money. We were doing the same thing in Nipmuc and Kakadu as well. Just to compare this AVHRR satellite, you can see it's much coarser, much harder to work with in terms of trying to work out where fires were for management purposes. If you compare that same mapping, you can see it's very, very coarse. And that's done by colleagues in Western Australia who do all of Australia these days for greenhouse gas emissions accounting, carbon accounting nationally. So you can see for management purposes, not real good, but this stuff is really good. So it's horses for courses, lots of different stuff around, but this stuff's expensive. Or well, not anymore, but time consuming. This is another comparison just to show you. This is the same sort of Landsat data. You can see the fire scars. I've enhanced this image a little bit so that the fire scars stand out really nicely, this lovely dark red colour. So you can see, you know, at this time, fire was pretty extensive. That was quite early, August. I think most of the area burnt October, November. And then another just enhancement. So you can see you can play around with these images and pull out lots of different features, I think, as Mandy was alluding to, with the different indices and bands that she uses for the segmentation of mapping. And just some more stuff. I've got to move on because time's running out now. Where do I click on this? This is, so really what it's all led to is this website that we developed a number of years ago, probably 2004 or something, with the Tropical Savannas CRC. Let's just go and look at Northwestern Australia. So this is mapping as it stands today. So all of those little spots, and if we can zoom into somewhere, we can see that those little spots resolve because they're derived from Imagery, and you can actually see that in the last week, this is where the fire... Oh, no. Just go away. That was a boo-boo, wasn't it? I can't make it go away. Does that do it? Yay. All right. So you can see all the little hot spots. So you as a land manager, say this is your property here, you can jump on here and you can see where fires have been occurring in the last week. The mapping in the background, the polygon mapping is done by colleagues. They use a similar method but slightly different classification method to what Mandy was talking about, object-oriented mapping in eCognition, and that's done about once a week. So you can see all of this stuff that we pull from, mostly from the MODIS satellite at 250 metres. There's lots of other data sets here that you can look at. So that's the hotspot. How do I get to there? So you can look at the fire scars. So that's for the current ones for 2015. You can go and look at any other year and display them. You can go and look at a whole lot of other data sets that we've derived that are there that might help you with your management and your planning. So from very humble beginnings, when we didn't really know much about the extent of fire, we now know a lot and we can tell you about it sort of on a nearly daily or weekly basis. There's another product I can't show on here, but Steph, are you going to show, maybe not show later? Stefan's got an automated burn area algorithm that updates with every single overpass of the MODIS satellite, which is 3 or 4 times a day. So you're getting almost current burnt area mapping. I mean, this stuff we're doing sort of semi-automated is, might be a week between us. So, being a fire manager in this part of the world is pretty useful. You're talking about there's, one woman I know quite well who coordinates all of the mapping for this area in the Kimberley. Talking about 400 square K sort of areas that people are using. How do I escape from there? It's back to my presentation. So this is how it started out. It started out fairly simply, just getting those hotspots and making maps in ArcMap ourselves and putting them on the web. And then we got into doing some burn area mapping and started putting that on. And we were only doing it for Arnhem Land at the time because it was pretty time consuming. And then we sort of automated a lot of it and ended up with that NAFI, North Australian Fire Information website. There's plenty of other fire data sets that we're producing as well. So this fire severity mapping is an algorithm that I derived doing my PhD to determine the amount of effect of fire on savanna vegetation. That's sort of I do a lot of validation, so all of those little coloured dots through Nipmuc there, from a helicopter flight I did where I actually sort of at 10-second intervals wrote down what the severity of the fire was as I was flying over it, and then I can use that to calibrate this mapping. And you can see for the purposes of mapping, I've only got 2 classes, not severe and severe, because a lot of people can interpret that better and interpret their management and how it's going, you know. So a not severe fire means it hasn't got up into the canopy. 11 seconds. And then we do a whole lot of modelling, and there's greenhouse gas emissions modelling that we do. That's years and years and years of work that I could just throw up there in one slide. Yeah, and a whole lot of other modelling with fire. Thank you. No, there's two products. There's the automated product that Stefan creates, and there's it's pretty much, the method hasn't changed very much. It's probably a little bit, you know, a lot of things that can be automated have been automated, but basically the operator is the classifier.
Yes.
Yeah. After, you know, some thresholds, just segmenting and threshold. It seems to be. It does seem to be a bit more. It looks better too. The automated stuff is coming out with a similar level of accuracy, probably a little bit better sometimes, but it just looks, you get this sort of salt and pepper effect that looks really crappy. Because this is, you know, this is people on the ground all over North Australia are looking at it. And so, yeah, it's sort of smoother, it looks neater.
And it makes it more user-friendly.
So it's user-friendly, yeah, which is what NAFI's all about, you know, delivering a product to people on the ground, ultimately. Well, no, primarily, yeah.